We have a variety of athletes. We have track and field. We have volleyball. We have football. We have soccer, basketball, and baseball. So a nice blend of backgrounds in here.
That covers the gamut.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I said that pretty much covers the whole gamut.
It does. And so nice blend of individual sports, team sports, and I know your background, but there's so much to know about you. I would feel more comfortable if you could sort of introduce yourself and your background, because with so many cool stops on your career, I don't want to leave anything out.
No, that's good, and we'll just try to cover the pertinent ones, really. Coached for a whole lot of years. When I got out of high school, I kind of knew I wanted to coach at the end of the day. I went to Cal Poly Pomona, actually, to play for a guy named Don Hogan. Right as school was starting, I got a phone call from my high school dean of discipline, who I was convinced for 4 years didn't like me. And he knew I was going to study physical education, wanted to get into coaching, and he told me that there was a job open at a local elementary school teaching PE and coaching. So I literally started coaching when I was 17, 18 years old and teaching 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade PE. So I've been in it a long time and started when I was young, so that gets me a whole lot of years. Anyway, ultimately ended up back at my alma mater, Bishop Amat High School, and coached primarily basketball there, even though I coached multiple sports at the junior high. My son was starting to get to high school age, and after a short stop of 9 years at Pomona Pitzer Colleges, I decided to come back to the high school level, coached him in high school, which was an interesting challenge, and ended up at Bishop Amat, won a CIF title there, was some places, ended up in a room full of old coaches called the Mentor Coach Institute, and I spoke up too much, and Positive Coaching Alliance got a hold of me, and I was at a quarterly meeting speaking full-time for them a couple of weeks later. And for about 15 years, I've basically been coaching coaches with some other little pit stops along the way. Coached some baseball at the high school that I thought my son was going to go to, kind of wanted to test drive it. He ended up playing at Covina High School. He's a baseball player at the University of Laverne now. I have 4 kids. All of them played collegiately. And so I can, talk from that perspective, from the other side of the bleachers as well, to some of you guys, and kind of navigating his collegiate experience now and getting a chance to talk to as many of you guys as I can. How's that?
Fantastic. So did you want to do some storytelling and some background, or do you want to jump in with questions? What would you be most comfortable with?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into questions, and that'll lead us into some stories. And yeah, I kind of am the story guy, so we can go ahead and get started with questions, and we'll approach it from that direction.
So Joe, Hudson, and Mia. Remember that, Joe, Hudson, and Mia. Joe.
All right. So my question is, how does a coach build a relationship with a player without compromising their own authority?
So how does a coach relate to a player without what?
How does a coach build a relationship with a player without compromising their own authority?
Yeah, that's funny. I mentioned going to Cal Poly Pomona to study coaching, and one of the first papers I wrote, the conclusion of the paper, so I was 18 years old probably, was if a coach shows that he cares about his players, proves that he's knowledgeable, and works as hard as he expects them to, then the player will try to be a good teammate, listen and try to learn and give their best effort. So that was the conclusion of my paper. And I still believe that to this day. In between time, I lost track of that a little bit. You get so caught up in coaching and all of the stuff that you have to do and the things that you learn that you think that the X's and O's and the operation of the sport is your philosophy, when really those three things were my philosophy. You got to care, you got to think, and you got to try. So I think the first part is the most important, right? If you can convince the players that you're working with that you care about them for a lot of different reasons, on and off the court, you want their best performance, then they start to accept coaching a little bit differently and understand that what you're trying to get them to do is in their best interest. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's it.
So, I mean, I think I just heard your core values, but what core values did you teach other coaches when you taught with the
Positive Coaching Alliance.
Yeah, gold standard coaching stuff now. I try to impart, you see, you can't give somebody their philosophy, right? You got to figure out what's important to them. So I think you mentioned core values. First thing I would do is get a bunch of coaches in the room and have them write down 3, 4, 5 things that are really, really important to them. Maybe it's best effort, maybe it's academics, maybe it's being on time. I get all sorts of different answers. Then from that, turn and try to craft some sort of a philosophy out of those core values that pertains just to dealing with the kids. You know, my philosophy is different than my style of play or how I coach, right? You can't say in basketball, for example, you know, that my philosophy is to press and fast break. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, you know, I want to get kids to give their maximum effort to become the best that they can be, or whatever, you know, thing is that is important to that particular coach. And those core values might change over time, right? What might have been important to me when I was 18, getting into coaching, certainly wasn't important, you know, when I was 40 or 50. Or not as important. And other things became more important. So that's a good exercise to, you know, go through and reevaluate what some of those things are that's very, very important. You know, all sorts of things manifest themselves through those core values. You know, when you care about somebody to the greatest extent possible, you're considering how my actions are going to affect theirs. And I think a coach really is someone who takes the time to figure out where a player wants to go and works to get them there. Certainly within the context of a team, you got to try to do that with 10, 15, 25, 50 people, depending on the sport. But you know, that's where your efforts should be placed, more so than where I think you need to go, right? We might have that conversation on, you know, your strengths and weaknesses and what goals you might have, but where the player needs to go is the most important thing that you should consider.
And Mia, your question?
Your answer.
That was your question? Okay. Hey, Hudson, is that go ahead.
I can blow it up. So then, what would you say are your core values now?
You said what are your core values now?
Like,
Yeah. You know, if you can simplify the things that are important to you. Like, I grew up at a time when John Wooden was he was the man. He was the, you know, most popular coach and the most successful coach. And he had this thing called a pyramid of success, 15 different blocks of qualities held together by a bunch of mortar of attitudes that, you know, kind of became his model for what you need to be successful. And that was really, really complex to me. You know, 25 different things I had to remember. So when you can really narrow things down to their lowest common denominator, that's when you're going to be able to hone in to what you're really trying to accomplish. And, you know, I wrote that paper, you know, when I was 18 about you got to care, you got to think, and you got to try. And then 25 years later, in the middle of a practice that wasn't going very well, you know, I kind of went on a mid-practice rant and, started getting on the players about playing like they didn't care, and they were making the same mistakes over and over again. Would you just think, give me, you don't even look like you're trying out there. And I sat down at my desk after practice and realized that was what I wrote 25 years earlier, and had got lost in all of that. So I really kind of downshifted, and those are the three most important things to me, is that you've got to care. You got to care a lot. You got to care about the person next to you. You got to care about yourself. Talking about players now, right? I'm going to try to impart those things onto my players, that you've got to care about your performance. You've got to know that what you do affects others. And I've got to think about how my actions are going to impact what's going on, either on the floor or off the floor, with my friends, with my teammates. And I got to give my best effort all the time. And if I can get kids to focus on those things, then it's easier to get them to give their personal best, work and try to improve, and then look forward to the next play, because they realize that that's only the most important thing. So care, think, and try. And as time went on, I realized that you're not going to be very good at anything unless you enjoy it. Over time, I spent more time and more effort doing things that I made sure were enjoyable for players, so that they could play with that joy and it would come out a little bit more. And I think that fourth thing was really kind of the cherry on the top of the ice cream sundae that made things a little bit more effective. You got to consider that nobody's going to give their best or stick around very long if it's not very fun.
And Joe, you know,
Just like, how do you show you care to players? Because I know a lot of coaches who try and do things, but sometimes those little things aren't as appreciated.
Yep.
How?
Yeah. I think a constant communication is important, and again, not just about the sport, right? We used to have a thing where we would check in with kids. We knew what everybody's schedule was, when their assignments were, when their papers were, when events were. If they were in an extracurricular activity, we knew that. And you got to talk about those things to kids, so that they know that you're concerned about them outside of just being a player. Then, as you're trying to get them to develop into the kind of person and player that you want, I think that you've got to convince them that you're looking out for their best interests, right? They all want to know what's in it for me. And you have to try to structure the things that you're doing with them to help them achieve certain goals along the way. That might take extensive discussion and team building and roles and goals talks at the beginning to try to get everybody on the same page. But I think that concern that you give to kids on your team starts to let them know that you care about them a little bit. And then as seasons roll on, you've got to appreciate them and recognize the efforts that they're making, especially the ones that aren't getting a lot of recognition through playing time and things of that nature, right? It's even more important to let those kids know how valuable they are as part of the group, even though they might not be contributing statistically. Coach, are they familiar with Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success at all?
times are changing. We have a few kids say, I know a little about it.
I think it should. I think it almost should be a course. Like I said, there are 15 different qualities that he's got in this block, and it's hard for any one person to be enthusiastic and industrious and skillful and friendly and all of those different things that he put. But what I did start to realize is that you need to have somebody on your team that brings each of those qualities to the group. And then maybe it'll spread throughout the group. So you got to have at least somebody that is working really, really hard. Somebody that's, makes good friends, keep things light. Somebody that's really super enthusiastic. Things of that nature, so that everybody brings something to the group that makes them valuable.
Sabrina, you have a
I
question?
think that is what I was going to say, but like, if there's like a player, like, or a group of players on a team who obviously like are better or someone, or like, they get like more playing time, just like players who don't, and they feel like they don't have like a spot on the team, or like they don't have confidence in themselves, like how do you help those players like gain their confidence and like feel like they're needed as a part of the team?
Yeah, as a leader, I think people follow your lead a little bit. When those better players on the team see the coach praising players who might not get as much playing time for their efforts or for their attitudes or how they're picking everybody up coming off the floor during a timeout or in practice, or how hard they work. When you show that those people are valuable, then other people on the team will recognize that a little bit. Then you have to do some possibly some team building things that might get them to recognize it if it doesn't come obvious to some people. It was a long process, but there was a year where I had the situation that you're talking about. The contributors on the team didn't necessarily recognize the people at the end of the bench, and so we started to put together, this stat sheet where we charted things that weren't just statistically on the court in a basketball team. So we would chart, effort plays, would chart enthusiasm on the bench, we'd chart, when you would, be the first person, when you'd run on the floor and run off the floor, all of the little things. And we had 2 or 3 assistants, and everybody had a few things that they kept track of. And that started to let people know the things that I felt were important. But then we had one coach that was really in tune with players' emotions. I thought he was really good at that. And he said, these kids, they need to recognize each other, and they need to see that recognition on more than just a stat sheet. So we came up with this program where we gave everybody a Gatorade bottle after a game. They drank the Gatorade. And then throughout the season, we would give them rewards based on, what they accomplished. And we would put, either a bead or a nut and a bolt and a screwdriver, a screw and a nail into the thing, and they could shake it up. It'd make noise. It was all kind of a fun post-game thing. But I wanted more than that. So every game I would give somebody a marble. And after the game, it was kind of like that personal game ball for everybody. They got to give the game ball, or they got to give their marble to somebody else in the room. So there were, basketball team, there were 15 marbles given out. And it started to become apparent that it wasn't the person that scored the most points or got the most rebounds that got somebody else's marble. It was somebody that might have picked them up when they took a charge, or they came out of the game with fouls and they cheered them up or talked to them on the bench, and a lot of things like that. And found out that, a lot of my subs ended up getting more marbles, than people that were really, really playing a lot. So it's a process, but you've got to work hard to create that kind of culture where everybody respects everybody else's individual contribution to the team, whether it's statistical or not.
I wanted to jump in with something it's not unique to Campbell Hall, but it's very much something every coach is going to have to deal with here at Campbell Hall specifically. And what we deal with a lot here is coaches are very frank and straightforward in explaining to athletes why they don't play. But what the athlete defaults to is, you tell me not to do something, and you're right, it's not the right thing to do. But I see you allowing another player to do exactly what it is you're telling me not to do. How do you navigate around that situation?
Yeah, first of all, fair doesn't mean equal, right? If you treat everybody fairly, that's the most important thing. Doesn't mean everybody has the same opportunities or is going to be allowed the same thing. Now, clearly favoritism is wrong. If somebody's making the same kind of, say, off the court mistakes, maybe getting in trouble in class or whatever. You kind of have to have some standards that you live up to, right? This is what our standards are. Maybe the best way to do that is to have the whole team sit down in a roles and goals talk and figure out what some of those non-negotiables are, right? And how we're going to deal with those different incidents and the consequences. But not everybody's going to be treated the same. Some players, might be treated different, but that doesn't mean that they're favorites. It just means that they're in a different circumstance, right? I can't just say that if you miss practice, you're not going to play, because one person might have to go to a funeral, one person might have an opportunity of a lifetime to go somewhere, and every situation is different. So there was a great coach, Larry Brown, basketball coach. He was at 100 different places, but he used to say, I don't have a lot of rules, but I got a lot of suggestions, right? So, when you have those suggestions on the things that we need to do to be a committed quality team, then, you can have those conversations with everybody and hopefully help them understand.
And going with that, you had told me a story once about when you were the basketball coach at St. Anthony, the quarterback of the football team. I want to say he had a scholarship to Nevada, maybe?
Yeah, Nevada Reno, yeah.
And you had a difficult conversation that you had to have. And it was interesting, our football team actually played St. Anthony this year.
Uh-huh.
Sadly, it wasn't at St. Anthony. They were redoing field, so it was at Pius Matthias. But can you talk about that experience that you had? Because it was clear that this person was a good enough athlete for you, but it wasn't necessarily the best fit.
Yeah, he was a really good athlete, and he was a really good kid. And he had played for the previous coach, and it was my first year there, and we had some really good players, and one of our best players ended up going to Duke. So, they were good players. And he was the starting quarterback. He was a option quarterback, so he ran a lot, and he was recruited as an athlete. I think he ended up being a defensive back at the college that he went to. And we had a talk one day. He said, I wanted to play basketball, and I wasn't sure he was really committed to it, and he just kind of wanted to be around the guys and was going to play, because he had played in the past. And he had told me during that meeting that he really just wanted to be a role player. He wanted to, rebound and pass and play defense and give the ball to Ricky, who's our best player, and watch him do something freaky with it. That was his quote. I can't forget that one. And, as time went on, he played that role pretty well, but he started getting disgruntled because he wasn't the guy that he was in football season. He was just a role player, played often enough not to feel like he was left out, but he certainly wasn't, a star or a starter. And it started to be a little bit disruptive, so we had that conversation, and really, my point to him was it was probably in his best interest, to spend this time, working to improve his strength. He needed to get a little bit bigger for college and get ready for his college experience because he had that scholarship in the bank, rather than going through, this turmoil. And you're more than welcome to come to games and hang out and be part of the group. But, I don't think that this is working out, Garrett. And we kind of came to a mutual agreement that, maybe he should just go and get ready for track season and start preparing for football. Is that the story you were talking about?
Absolutely. It's just those conversations are never easy. And this is our enrollment here. It's probably similar to what St. Anthony's was when you were there.
Yep.
We kind of need athletes, but at the same time, we don't need athletes who have an unrealistic expectation of their role. So those are really different.
Yeah, see, I think that as a coach, it really comes down to our job is twofold. We're trying to get our players to compete, and then we're trying to build character. And, sometimes those two things conflict, and you can't do them both at the same time, and you've got to make a choice one over the other. We would have been better if actually it wasn't Garrett, it was Garnett. We would have been better on the floor and as a team if Garnett was still a part of our group. You know, he provided athleticism, more depth, all of those things. Ended up losing in the semifinals to Santa Clara, who were coming off 4 consecutive state championships on kind of a last-second opportunity. And, you know, there was a pass to the guy who probably wouldn't have been on the floor if Garnett was still with us. It went through his hands and out of bounds. So, you know, we might have, you know, kicked that one into the can because we didn't have him. But I think it was better for the both of us moving on. But point being is that sometimes those things conflict. And you've got to make a choice as a coach. What's more important, building character or having a better team? Sometimes, you know, you got to have that difficult conversation, and younger coaches run away from those conversations, right? And then things start to fester and get worse. When in reality, you should run towards that difficult moment and have that conversation, because that's when men and women are built. Right, during those difficult times, during that tough conversation, is when you know, you can come out of it being a better person at the end of the day. So they are difficult moments, but they're teachable moments, and we have to take advantage of every one of those as a coach.
Thank you. You also mentioned, well, I told this to you via direct message. You did a great job explaining that you have a standard in your program. So if it's baseball, okay, the expectation is we always sprint to first. I don't care if the contact is light. I don't care if it's clear that you're going to get thrown out at first, but we're always sprinting to first. So you have a player that doesn't sprint to first, and instead of yelling at them and name calling, you say, with this program, the expectation of the standard is we sprint to first. And in every sport, you can establish a standard. The question I think was Hudson that you asked was, what do you do when someone doesn't meet the standard? Obviously, the first time you tell them, but when it's habitual, how do you handle it?
Many coaches have always said that the best discipline is through the seat of the pants, and they don't mean, you know, a spanking. They means the bench. You know, you've got to be okay as a coach with taking that kid out, and a lot of times, again, that's one of those moments where you've got a difficult moment, and you know, one decision is going to make you better, help you be more competitive and able to win, but the other one is really a lesson that needs to be done. My son plays baseball at the University of Laverne, and they're ridiculous in things like this. The standards that they have are amazing, and the accountability that they hold each other to is tremendous. Running hard to first base, always completing a play. For example, ground ball down the third base line. Even if the umpire yells foul, that third baseman makes the throw to first. You know, that's one extra rep that we get to, you know, try to make that play, get better. And what happens if you anticipate him calling it foul and he doesn't call it foul? Right? So always complete the play, whatever it is. And they're amazing that way. And, you know, it's a deep enough roster where there's 30 or 40 guys where if they don't, you know, coach doesn't rant and rave. He just tells somebody else to, you know, sub in and get a bat and pinch hit for him the next inning.
Okay, Chloe, what's one of your questions?
I was kind of thinking, how are people able to see if their coaching is successful? And how do they see, like, if you just apply something or suggest something, how are they able to see how they've grown over the years that you coached them?
Yeah. The coach needs constant reinforcement, right? You need to recognize their efforts more than their results. I think that's especially important when they're making an effort and it might not be successful, right? So the unsuccessful effort. What sport do you play, Chloe?
Volleyball.
Okay. So if I'm trying to get you to fix your footwork as an outside hitter and get your timing down, and you're trying to do what I'm asking you to do and you happen to mishit it, or you're trying to, I'm trying to get you to hit with your left hand on the left side, or whatever the case may be. If it's unsuccessful and you hit the ball out, I can't get mad at it if you're trying to make the change that I'm asking you to make, right? I want you to develop a jump serve and you hit it into the net, but you really tried to do everything that I've been trying to teach you. I can't get mad at you, right? I got to praise you for the effort, and then maybe make an adjustment and a teaching point on why it'll be more successful the next time. So, praising the effort is huge. And you need to do that as a coach relentlessly, right? Every time you see somebody trying to do what you ask them to do, it should be recognized of some sort, right? You don't necessarily have to make a big deal about it and stop practice and, give everybody a standing ovation, but, commenting and letting them know that you saw their effort and you appreciate what it is that they're trying goes a long way to them continuing to try. Because if I'm asking you to learn to jump serve, for example, and you keep hitting it into the net, and I get mad at you for hitting it into the net, you're going to stop trying to jump serve. You're just going to try to get it in, because that's what my focus is, the result. Where if I'm trying to, make players better, I should focus more on the effort than the final result.
Bella. She's got to open up her laptop to see your question. All right, yeah, ask your follow-up.
So let's just say you're trying to get someone to do something differently or more effectively, and they kind of hit a lull. How do you keep them inspired and motivated to keep trying and keep pushing themselves, even when they're not seeing the results they want? The effort is there.
Yeah, if we can get into the spirit of growth and improvement as a team, that goes a long way. So it shouldn't just be me as a coach. We're all in this together. I tell teams when I go and talk to students all the time that they shouldn't ever leave the court or the field or go into the locker room thinking that the coach didn't praise them enough, because you guys outnumber the coach, right? You might have 11 other teammates who can, praise you and try to pick you up when you make a mistake or encourage you to continue to try. And it's amazing when those other teammates start to recognize your effort, how it really fills. I talk about an emotional bank account, right? It fills your emotional bank account. When you've got a lot of money and your bank account is full, you can go do a lot of things. But when you're broke, you're kind of stuck, right? So we want everybody to fill everybody's emotional bank account so that they can, go out and perform to the best of their ability. So it's really that encouragement. That's a great word, encouragement, right? When you break it down, encouragement enables you to play with the courage to try.
Bella.
Okay, so I have a question about a coach. So let's say you have a great team and everything, and then you have a negative coach that starts to downplay how the team their units are. What do you think the team can do to because I like to hear each other out of books, but what do you think you can do to sort of counteract that, but in a positive and respectful?
Sure. Well, I need to come and have a talk with that coach, right? Because that's not the most effective over the long haul, right? There are certainly coaches that are they win games that might be negative or yell and scream, but over the long haul, to accomplish the things that you want as a coach, it's probably not the most effective long term. So from a coaching perspective, that's bad, right? Now, if you're asking how do teammates, how does the team handle it? A lot of what I think it was Chloe that just asked that question, right? It's a team effort, right? That emotional bank account can get deposits from everybody, not just the coach, but the teammates, parents, friends, student body, all of those kind of things. So if everybody pitches in to encourage each other, that helps you get through tough times. The other thing is that quite often that disappointment is based on a negative result. And when you decide your self-worth based on just a result, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? The only thing that really matters is if you're giving your personal best, doing the things that you need to do to improve, and if that doesn't go well, turn around and do it again on the next play, right? But if I worry about, my performance or my stats or the scoreboard or the standings, that's all based on some external expectation, and expectations are really what determine whether somebody's disappointed at the end of the day or not, right? So focusing on the things that you can control is a better goal into trying to figure out at the end of the day whether I was successful or not and how I should deal with that, right? Coach Wax, there was a time when you were coaching a long time ago when it was still Concordia Irvine, or before Concordia Irvine, it was Christ College. I don't know if you... Yeah. And we were playing them. They were the 7th ranked team in the country. They were NAIA scholarship school. We were Division III school at Pomona Pitzer. And we were winning most of the game. And about 15 seconds left, they score to take the lead. We answer back. We take the lead again. So you can imagine that back and forth. Everybody in the stands is cheering. And we scored with 7 seconds to go up by a point, and they threw the ball into, their preseason All-American, and he hit about a 60-footer, and we lost at the buzzer. Dejected, right? Slumped back to the locker room. Head coach, Charlie Katsiafikis, Coach Kat, bursts into the room, and I thought he was mad and was going to throw something, and he couldn't have been happier, right? Because, his point was for 39 minutes and 53 seconds, you were on top of the world and excited. And you're going to let some lucky shot that happens in the last 7 seconds determine, how you played and how you feel about the day. So you can be disappointed in a result and really, really proud of your effort and your performance. And I think the more that a coach and a program establishes those standards, the better they're going to be at the end of the day. The year we won CIF at Bishop Amat, on the back of our T-shirt, it said solid possession by possession, right? We wanted every play to be the same, whether it was in practice, in a preseason game, or in the fourth quarter in March. And when you can get yourself to play that way all the time, because that's really the only way to play, then all of a sudden, pressure is irrelevant, the score is irrelevant. All that really matters is this particular moment, and I need to take advantage of it.
Speaking of Bishop Amat, can you talk about when you took that basketball team who later won CIF, the light bulb moment that you had with that team when you
Yeah, I took over a team that was really, really talented, didn't really like each other. Parents didn't really like the old coach, and they were really, really fast-paced, aggressive team, and a little bit out of control. And so I had some good players. Was trying to earn their trust. So I'd walk around with a different guy, after practice just to get to know him a little bit. Our best player, his name was John Haywood, ended up playing at Loyola Marymount. And we walked into our Hall of Fame, and Bishop Amat's a really good football school, right? And in our Hall of Fame, there are all these retired football jerseys. And I asked John, I says, do you see any basketball jerseys up there? And he said, no. And I says, well, do you know how you get your jersey retired and why all those football jerseys are up there. And he said, be the all-time leading scorer, set a lot of records. And I said, no, we retire the CIF Player of the Year. And the CIF Player of the Year is usually the most valuable player on the championship team. And so he just kind of sat back and he realized that it wasn't really mostly about my individual performance. He realized that it was about team success first, right? And then when that team is successful, the individual players on that team who might achieve are going to get some recognition. So that really was an aha moment. He kind of gave a smile. He referenced that, introducing me at a Hall of Fame thing many years later. I think there was a really good newspaper article about that as well. But, when you recognize that your individual recognition comes from team success, that's when you start playing for each other and making sure that the other guy is getting opportunities too.
Thank you. DJ.
My question for you is that, what do you think is the best strategy to, coaching or, rallying a player that's just, is being consistently, disrespectful and, out of line and just, doesn't really respect your coaching style or authority?
So if you have a player who is not interested in your coaching style, your authority, and is very open about they're not interested in your authority and your coaching style, how do you handle that?
Yeah, there are other sports and other activities that he can do. Again, you've got to be okay with losing some kids. I mean, I've told parents to take checks back. I've told parents that maybe they should take their gun, right, that they donated, and take their kid elsewhere. Yeah, the shooting gun, right? Yeah, rebounding machine, I guess. But you have to be open and honest, and you've got to make it very clear that that's not acceptable in our program. And if you can't treat me, you can't treat our assistant coaches, you can't treat teammates that way, because the very first thing I said was it's important that you care. And if you don't care about everybody else, then you probably don't care enough to be part of the group, right? Now, are you going to do that the first time that you see that instance? No, you're going to try to work through it with the kid and help them understand, the importance. And, when you show that you care about them, sometimes you hope that reciprocates and he cares about others. But sometimes push gets to shove and, maybe it's time to go play soccer.
And Joe has Joe.
You talked about how John Wooden is someone that you revere as a coach. What are some other coaches that you put up on the pedestal and how their philosophy is shaped the way you think?
Yeah. I mentioned Pomona Pitzer College. I was at Bishop Amat High School as an assistant. I had an opportunity to go interview at Pomona Pitzer College, and when I got there, I asked the head coach, how come my position as an assistant is open? And he said, well, I used to be the assistant, and I just moved up because the head coach moved on. And I said, well, where did he go? And he said, well, the San Antonio Spurs. It was Greg Popovich. So Greg Popovich was coaching Division III basketball at Pomona Pitzer. Had a losing record, to be honest. Made a connection with Larry Brown and ended up being the San Antonio Spurs coach. So we were still coaching his guys. And he would come around a lot, those first couple of years when some of his recruits were still playing. Anytime they were in town to play the Clippers and Lakers, he'd come by and see us and would go out. And his philosophy makes a lot of sense to me in a lot of different ways. He's a little misunderstood by some people once in a while because he's a little gruff with reporters in between quarters, but that's pretty much his shtick and an act, and the reporters actually love him. But Pop has said a few things that are really, really important to me. You know, the whole one possession at a time thing is really a Popism. We were at dinner one time after a game, and he said, you know, basketball isn't really a game, right? You can't look at it as a single game. It's a series of games. It's maybe 100 games, right? 50 games on offense and 50 games on defense. And once one of those games is over, you've got to forget about it, put it behind you, learn from it, and move on to the next one. Just like you would a game on your schedule, right? If I got a game coming up on Friday, I can't be thinking about last Friday's game, except for the things that I needed to learn from it. So same thing with an individual possession or an individual serve or an individual pitch in baseball or playing football, whatever it is. I've got to put that past behind me and just focus on this very next play. And if you can sift that down even further, there are so many little micro executions within every play. And I think I developed through that philosophy what I think my definition of toughness is. Like, I think one of the most important things for a competitor to be is tough. And not the fake tough guy, you know, I'm going to growl and mean mug and be overly physical. Not that kind of tough. But toughness to me is the ability to focus on the one single thing that's most important right at this very moment. So maybe I'm a point guard. I'm focusing on getting the ball up the floor. Maybe I'm focusing on how I'm doing that, angles, you know, technique. Then I got to make the pass. I'm focusing on just that pass. I got to hit that, you know, target hand. And now I'm going to go set a screen. The only thing that's important is that I go set that screen. And I know somebody's going to try to bump me off of that screen, but I'm focused. I need to go set that screen. That's toughness. Or I'm using the screen. I got to use it tight. That's the only thing that's important. Maybe I get hit while I'm going to set a screen and it hurts. Well, what's more important at that moment? Right, going and setting the screen or acting hurt. Now, if you're injured, that's more important, right? But if you got an owie and it hurts a little bit, well, maybe you got to play through it. But there's some level of importance, and if I can focus on the most important thing at any given moment, that's what I think tough is, right? Then if you do that one possession, it works out or it doesn't, you know, you come back and do it and again the next play, that's resilience. Right? When you can bounce back from an unsuccessful play and try just as hard the next play, right? That's being resilient. Sometimes that doesn't work out at the end of the day and we might lose. Well, do I have the grit to come back and fight through a losing streak or a tough time like was asked about before, to continue those efforts and overcome them and try to get better? Right? So to me, there's a difference between toughness, resilience, and grit. Toughness is that immediate thing. Resilience is bouncing back, and grit is sticking to it over the long term. But that's really a Pop thing. And he puts winning and losing in such great perspective. They were in the finals. They were going to Game 7, and somebody asked him, you know, what he thought. And he said, well, I think both teams are going to give their best. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, and then we're going to go eat. And that was how he approached Game 7. So, you know, Pop is great. And then for a lot of other reasons, you know, other coaches, you know, whether it's Coach Krzyzewski, Nick Saban, I think is amazing when it comes to the process of how you do things. I think Dave Roberts with the Dodgers is great in managing people. You know, so I would say that those, you know, 4 or 5 guys are really, you know, kind of my favorites currently for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then the last question will be from me.
All right.
Something that's changed a lot since you started coaching till today is how much the outside world influences the athlete, because now we have social media. So kids read about how great they are, and they get the validation often from the periphery, and now there's a rub between what the outside world thinks of that athlete and what coach is asking the athlete to do. How do you get athletes to look to their coach for the validation and instruction rather than receive it from the periphery.
Well, if I'm giving them all of the validation that they deserve, they shouldn't really need to go elsewhere, right? If we're all doing our job as teammates, as coaches, as a student body, the outside noise shouldn't really matter. But understood that it does. And those outside influencers are tough to turn off. So it comes back to that very, very first thing that I said about buying into the group. I need to really care about the people that are in the locker room with me, right? That has to be the most important thing. These guys, these girls are the most important players, the most important people, from now until the end of the season. And all of the outside noise, we need to try to turn it off. And that's an ongoing struggle, with kids a lot, especially when it comes to, rankings and, things like that. Like I said, if I'm using, my rankings or my stats or my standings or my score to validate myself, then I'm not really doing the things that are necessary to get as good as I need to be. That's distracting. I need to focus on those other things that, the personal best and trying to get better. We talk a lot about growth mindset. That's kind of becoming a catch-all phrase now, and it's misunderstood a lot. But I think it leads us into trying to get better when we can eliminate all that noise and really just focus on my efforts to improve. The very first thing that's necessary for all of that to happen is that the coach has to instill the belief that that work is going to be effective, right? So kids, players have to believe that the things that we're going to do are going to help them. Then they're going to go out and do those things that they need to do. And if they do them right, we should see some improvement. And that improvement, hopefully, makes the light bulb come on and creates a little bit more confidence, a little bit more belief. And it's like a cycle, right? That belief is going to inspire more work, more improvement. It's going to give you more belief, and that's how kids spiral and continue to get better. But it has to be, all us, the whole, one for all for one kind of mentality, and kind of just forget about everybody outside. That's an ongoing struggle. But you know what? That's why there are so many average teams, right? The ones that are able to overcome that are really the ones that are able to achieve the kind of success that they want at whatever level that might be, right? It might mean a championship at the end of the day. It might just be, being as good as your particular team can be, which really should be the standard at the end of the day.
We can't thank you enough for your time.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you, Mr. Wax. Thank you, guys. There were some very thoughtful questions. I always appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.